My name is Skow. I am the executive director and founder of Marley's Mutts Dog Rescue. I am an alcoholic and an addict with 9 years of recovery. And I just found out that come April, I'm going to be the proud daddy of a baby girl. Did you hear that, Mom? So, I'm also a rescue dog advocate. And the only reason I'm standing here with you guys here today, giving this talk and sharing my stories, is because my rescue dogs advocated for me. I truly believe in my core that dogs are medicine. They're the best medicine. They were medicine for me when nothing else worked. And the best part about this form of medicine is that you can find it at virtually any county or city animal shelter, virtually free of charge, just like Lucy Girl here. In 2008, at 28 years of age, I was diagnosed with end-stage liver disease and given less than 90 days to live without a liver transplant. Doctors told me I was not eligible for a liver transplant for 2 reasons. One, I was not healthy enough to take transplant, but primarily the main reason was that alcoholics and addicts need 6 months of sobriety in order to qualify for transplant. And what that meant for my family was something incredibly devastating. That basically kicked off 5 weeks of a hospital stay at Bakersfield Memorial Hospital, where I just got worse and worse and sicker. And the doctors had gotten to a point where there's nothing they can do for me. They can't give me a transplant. They can only pump me full of Dilaudid and morphine, which I became addicted to. The one thing I had going for me was a dad that absolutely has been my biggest advocate from day one. He's an aeronautical engineer, and he took to my wellness and my problem, my sickness, my disease, like a math problem. And he wasn't going to say no. He wasn't going to hear that his son was going to die. And so when the doctors were saying, why don't you guys just go home for hospice and let him transition at home, surrounded by his family instead of in a hospital, my dad saying, my son's not going to die, we're going to figure this out. Never underestimate the power of a motivated father. So he got me, by the grace of dog, he got me into a comprehensive transplant program. And when literally we had absolutely no hope left, we got a call from Dr. Tran, who's the head of transplant at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, which is where I was born, ironically. And they said, you've got a meeting with Dr. Tran, get your butt down here, and we'll check you in. We'll see you over. So they literally pulled everything out of my, pulled all the tubes out, pulled all the needles out, and we had to sign all the paperwork that said, this is a terrible decision, what you're doing. And they rushed me down to Cedars-Sinai, and Mom nearly killed me on the drive down. And we were admitted into the Comprehensive Transplant Center at Cedars-Sinai. And at first, it kind of looked like I was just going to go die at the place I was born, and I didn't want that. But instead, what they did was they dedicated themselves to helping me survive 6 months, to trying to get to that 6-month elusive barrier. Keep in mind, I had not been 6 months. I had not been 6 hours sober, much less 6 days, weeks, or months for 12 years prior to that. I was an everyday, 24-hour-a-day drinker and user. So they gave us instructions. They sent me home, and they said, stay near an emergency room. You're going to get sick, and try to survive 6 months. Do your best. And they took me off a lot of my medicines. They took me off the painkillers, which were also killing me, and they sent me home. And that's where we meet my dogs, Tug and Marley. Tug is, every day when I was in the hospital, when my dad would go home, my dad would whisper to me, he'd lean over my bed, he'd say, son, I really need you to come home. I can't get Tug to come in the damn house. He's just sitting in the driveway, looking down the driveway, waiting for his dad. And so he would try to guilt me into feeling better, into rallying. And so when I got home, needless to say, Tug was elated to see me, and it's like his life could finally go on. I think he'd been holding his breath for 6 weeks. My 2 dogs couldn't be any different. They're both from the Mojave Animal Shelter. Tug is an incredibly insecure, neurotic lab with very low self-esteem. He basically, everything that was going on in me, I transferred into my dog. Poor guy. And Marley, conversely, was everything that I'd always wanted to be. Marley was incredibly confident. He's a Rottweiler pit bull. This is him right here. And he's just got that look of grace and confidence. And the way he walked into a room, I mean, people wanted to be him, animals wanted to be him. And he was never pugnacious. He was never one of those dogs that picked a fight. He just, he broke up fights. He just wanted to keep the peace. He was all about symbiotic harmony. And so, my dogs began to play a critical role in my life then. They'd always been important to me, but I would need them most then. You know, unfortunately, what happened for me when I got home was suicide. Suicide became my #1 enemy. Alcohol and drugs had been my enemy for the longest time before that. And then I became obsessed and preoccupied with suicide. I knew where my dad's gun was, and I would dream about going out into I would fantasize about going out into the woods, into the mountains somewhere where no one could find me, and blowing my brains out. I just didn't want, I wanted to find a way to take my own life without my dad finding me, because my dad had done so much for me. I didn't want him to have to find my body at the house, you know. Thought about driving off bridges, anything you could think of. You know, it all kind of changed where we had an epiphany one day. I was going through an illness called esophageal varices. If you're familiar with liver disease, is a very ugly illness where you're vomiting blood consistently. Your esophageal veins are basically rupturing. And so I was huddled around the toilet in my usual position. I was completely naked. Dogs around me, as they always were. And I stood up and I looked into the mirror, and I didn't recognize what I was looking at. I didn't understand what I was looking at. I just saw a scared to death old man. I was bright yellow. My stomach was 9 months pregnant, swollen. I had a herniated belly button. I had these gnarly varicose veins that were feeding this blood and bile that had accumulated in my stomach. It was one of the most disgusting things you've ever seen. My arms were skinny. I was 140 pounds. My muscles were atrophied. I had this little old man butt. I remember looking at my butt in the mirror going, you know, even that brought me, I just looked, I didn't recognize myself. I was utterly pitiful, hopeless, and I just started to sob. I started to weep, and I just thought, this is my rock bottom. There's no reason for me to be here. I can't do this anymore. I didn't have it within me. I hadn't had it within me for a decade before, and nothing had changed. And then I could feel my dogs looking at me behind me, and I took a look at them, and Marley and Tug were looking up at me like I was, you know, the sexiest man alive. Just like I was this, just Brad Pitt and George Clooney combined, and they didn't understand. They didn't see the pain. They may have seen the pain, but they didn't see. They just saw Dad. They just saw the guy that had rescued them, and they just saw the person that they wanted to infuse some positive energy into. So I'm paint the picture, completely naked, yellow. What isn't yellow on me is bruised. I have a big scar from a catheter that was in my back that was draining my stomach. I'm crying, I'm completely naked, sweating, and my dogs are looking up at me just like, yeah. What's going on, Dad? You know, what do you want to do, Dad? And just so excited about the day, about the proposition, about sky was the limit, and that became the first day for the rest of my life. That day we decided to make a small move, because life is about small moves. You can't change it all at once. And that day we decided to start walking. And I still had ammonia on my brain, so I couldn't balance very well. I couldn't do a push-up, a sit-up, a squat, a lunge. If you saw me, I was the sickest sick person you've ever seen in your entire life. That's what I looked like. I looked like death frozen over. And so we made that decision. And the next day we started to walk. And then the day after that. And then several times a day. And then weeks turned into months. And every day we got a little bit better. And every day we got a little bit better. And my blood tests, which I was taking every 2 days and then every week, started to get a little bit better. And started to get a little bit better. And I started to get into rescue, which I had done before I got sick. I started to add dogs to my pack because I'm walking like 6 times a day. I might as well bring some dogs into my pack. And I started taking pictures of them, and I started writing their stories, and I started throwing myself into rescuing dogs and volunteering at different organizations. And I found amazing this revival within myself because I found purpose. I had these dogs 1,000% depended on me for their future. Not only to get out and walk them and do all the menial stuff, but this dog needs a home. This dog comes from behind bars, and it has no future, and I need to provide that for him. So I wrote anywhere that would accept my posters, I put them up all over town, everywhere. I think people sometimes it was a little dirty, a little raunchy, so I think some of the conservative people in Tehachapi, some people took issue with them, but they were great. They were so successful. We started having adoption after adoption after adoption, and adding more dogs to my pack, and then that's how Marley's Mutts was born. That's how Marley's Mutts was born. Right? People took notice of this yellow guy walking dogs, and we started to change the world. And fast forward now, 9 years, And we've saved thousands of animals and thousands of people, and we continue to make a positive effect in any way, shape, and form we can. Any way we can use the human-canine bond to better people's lives, we do it. Any way possible. And we've only just scratched the surface. And I can't wait to see what the next 10 years are like when we keep trying to get into the dark places of this world and find out how dogs can bring light. So finally we got 6 months. I hit my 6-month mark. It's time to go down to Cedars-Sinai and hear the good news, hear the bad news. I got my CAT scan, my ultrasound, my blood work, and they said you no longer need a liver transplant. Your body has miraculously healed itself and is continuing to heal itself, and whatever you're doing, keep doing it. So that's what I did. I went back home, and Marley and Tug and all my brood of misfit mutts, we dedicated ourselves to bringing the human-canine bond wherever we could. We went to the Valley Achievement Center for Autistic Youth. We went to the mission at Kern County, where we've done all kinds of 12-step programs. We go to the Bakersfield Homeless Center. I went to hundreds of meetings, hundreds and hundreds of recovery meetings and halfway houses and sober livings, and the light that these dogs brought. The hope that these dogs brought, the unconditional love that these dogs brought, what took place in me, the transformation that took place in me, which really was a man learning how to love himself through the eyes of his dog, was taking place in these people. A lot of these people are coming out of opiate withdrawal, and they need Lucy looking at them that way. They need that contact. When they're about to be vulnerable, when they're sharing in a meeting, they need someone there to help let them know it's going to be okay. Some of them haven't been unconditionally loved in their entire life. You know, and all kinds of wonderful things started to happen. And then I got a phone call from a woman who said her son had just gotten out of prison. He'd been out of prison for 2 weeks. He'd been in for 12 years in Oklahoma, and she was scared to death he was going back to prison. And she wanted to adopt a dog, and I had just the dog for him. So I said, come on up. They came on up, and he answered the door, and he was a feral human being, completely feral human being. He wouldn't make eye contact with me, didn't understand how to have, understandably had a tough time having interactions with men that weren't coarse, that weren't filled with tension. Hadn't had a conversation with a woman in 12 years, and yet we're expecting him to branch out into the world and understand where you think you're going. And here come here, baby girl. And here we expect him to enter back into society, and he was scared to death. He was scared to death of people, places, and things, something I could totally relate to. And so we gave him Shadow. Shadow was found in a crate in Ridgecrest with 2 other dogs. One was frozen to death and had been shot, and Shadow had also been shot in the lung. We actually removed 2 of the 3 lobes of her lung and pulled out a .40 caliber bullet. So we paired the 2 of them up, and that was the first day of the rest of Robbie's life. That was the first day of the rest of his life. And without Shadow, I guarantee you Robbie would be back in prison. He didn't know the first thing about really he was scared, and he didn't know how to identify with being scared. He was intimidated. He didn't know, but with the dog, all those interactions are pacified. You have a dog like this, Shadow looks a lot like Lucy, and people are going to come up to you and be like, what's going on with your dog? Who's your dog? Rather than having this uncomfortable mano, or there's a dog to pacify it, to make it more simple and make it more loving. And so that's how he started to learn. That's how he got some momentum. That's how he was able to put one foot in front of the other like I was. Fast forward, Robbie starts volunteering for us. He starts giving his testimony at the mission at Kern County because Mom made him. And he starts working with us, working with dogs. And he gets hired at Free to Live Animal Sanctuary, which is a huge organization, as their ranch manager and kennel director. And so here I think to myself, this guy who had no hope has now solidified a job and a future for his family and his girlfriend and a life away from crime. He's not going to be a statistic. Let's figure out how to do this. Because the statistics are 80% of men who get out of prison are going to end up back there within 3 years. 80% back within 3 years. Guess how much it costs to incarcerate a man in the state of California? Roughly $50,000. $50,000 per year just to incarcerate. That's more than I make. Let's think about that for a minute. So we set out to trying to replicate this, we had accomplished with Robbie inside penitentiaries. And we met some negative feedback at first, but we weren't going to take no for an answer. And thank God for Lisa Porter, and thank God for Karma Rescue. We were able to get our foot in the door at Cal City State Penitentiary, and that's when amazing, miraculous things started to happen. We established A 14-week-long program, 10 dogs, 25 inmates. And the purpose is for those inmates to train the dogs to achieve canine good citizen certification. That's basically halfway to therapy dog status. And the men at the end get a legitimate vocational certificate stipulating that they're proficient in training. They can also re-enroll and get more accreditation and more accreditation. The idea is that the pet industry is a $90 billion a year industry. $90 billion a year. And they don't so much care if you have a felony record if you're going to be a dog trainer. All of us have dogs now. They're like family. And a lot of us have troubles with our dogs. So we have an opportunity to put a whole lot of guys that don't otherwise have a vocation or a way to support themselves when they get out of prison with a job that they love and a job that they have a lot of experience with. Rather than just being a welder or an electrician or some of the other things that they offer in prison. So we knew there would be some benefits. We knew those things would happen, vocational training, dogs. These are all dogs from high-kill shelters. And what really started to happen was these dogs that desperately needed these men for rehabilitation were rehabilitating one another. And we saw all these walls start coming down. We saw racial walls start coming down. In prison, men of other races don't get along. They don't interact with one another. And we had guys, the heads of the Black Gorilla family and the head of the Bulldogs, which is a white gang, partnering up over a Chihuahua named Chiller, and then giving a speech at graduation where both the men cried and both the men talked about how the other is their brother and that they don't know what they would do without him, that they were all brothers. And so we saw gang lines coming down. We have Crips, Bloods, Aryans, Black Gorilla family, Northerners, Southerners. Everybody's represented in our programs, especially at Corcoran State Prison, which is one of the toughest prisons in California. And we were able to pull it off. And we brought the violence down in that yard. And we brought the interaction between correctional officer and inmates up. And all kinds of magic started to happen. We started to reunite families with their loved ones. They started to follow on Facebook. And these people who have been out of sight, out of mind, and nobody's paid attention to. Guys who haven't talked to their kids in 10 years. Somebody wrote a letter to me about about their daughter who had written him off. Said, I don't want you to be my dad anymore. I don't ever want to hear from you. And after being in the dog program, she wrote back and said, I want you to be in my life. I need you, Dad. I'm so proud of you. Is there anything I can do to help support the program? So we're now in 4 prisons. We're at California City, Wasco, North Kern, and Corcoran State Prison. And it is my goal, it is my direction in life, it is my purpose in life to take this program and expand it to every penitentiary in the state of California. Because dogs are medicine. They are the best medicine, and they are free of charge. So thank you guys for letting me share. I really appreciate it.